Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome to a video that I think is going to get a fair number of comments, and I'm looking forward to reading them all. 5 years ago, if one was asked for a recommendation of the best first watch to buy somebody or to gift somebody, the default answer would have been Seiko 5. No question about it, and I reviewed several Seiko 5s in the early days of the channel, including the legendary SNKL23. But that was 5 years ago. Seiko 5s aren't nearly as cheap as they used to be, and with AliExpress brands offering ridiculous specs for similar money and online retailers discounting technically superior watches from other brands, has the humble Seiko 5 been left behind? Is it now a relic from a former age? Is it even relevant in 2023? Those are the questions today, and I thought I would structure this video around a 5 things I like and 5 things I don't like format to help give a balanced assessment of Seiko 5s in general, and this one in particular, the SNXS73. And I've got to give a shout out to Alex, who works at my local Harvey Norman electronic retailer in Sydney's Broadway shopping centre. We've met a few times over the course of this year. He did me a great deal on a telly, I gave him a Casio, and he loaned me this Seiko. Thank you very much, Alex. So, watch the video, then leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. Is this still a watch you would recommend to others? Is this still a watch you would buy yourself? Or is it time Seiko retired the range and put these watches out to pasture? Let's flip the camera and find out. Okay, let's start with the 5 things I like about these Seiko 5s. The first, as intimated in the intro, is the brand. I think Seiko is the strongest brand you can put on your wrist, the best brand if you're spending $500 or less. I think Tissot is up there by virtue of the fact that it's Swiss, but Seiko is such a powerhouse. They're so well known, so well respected, and with a history like no other. And you're not paying $500 for one of these, are you? You're paying much, much less than that, and you even get a nice little box and a hang tag, etc., as you just saw. Which brings me to the second thing I like, the price. No, they may not be as cheap as they used to. You used to be able to pick these up for about $65 and up, whereas now they seem to be starting at $100 and up. That's the best price I could find on eBay. I'll leave links in the description. Depends on what model you go for though. The specific watch I'm showing today, the SNXS73, seems to start at about $150 and then go up from there. But even so, that isn't a huge amount of money in the great scheme of things for a big brand watch, especially when that brand is Seiko. And while we're there, the third thing I like about these is there are just so bloody many of them. You are bound to find one you like the look of. Black dials, silver dials, white dials, blue dials, gold hands, gold cases, dressy ones, sporty ones. You know, they're all quite similar in terms of size and specs, but they still manage to get a fair range of looks overall. If you're not somehow morally opposed to the Seiko 5, there are just so many of these. I'm pretty sure you'll find one to match your own personal style, your own personal attire. And this specifically is a good looking little watch as well. Nice clear applied indices, applied logo, good hands, and a bit of sunburst. You would have no complaints settling in with this one for many years. The next thing I like is the versatility. It's a simple 3-hander but with day-date complication. These watches are designed to be worn as dailies, and so it makes sense to have the day and the date both displayed on the dial. Plus you get a little bit of lume on all of these 5s. And it's not just any lume, it's Seiko's Lumi Bright, which is usually pretty decent. Don't expect it to outlast your Rolex Submariner, but I usually complain bitterly about the lume in most watches at this price point, but I have no complaints whatsoever about the lume in this one. The last thing I really like is the display caseback. Now, this is a 7S26, more on that later. Not the most attractive of movements, there's no perlage, there are no stripes, there's no engraving on any of the plates. But inquisitive minds, young or old, can spend many hours, I'm sure, happily staring at the movement of the movement and marvelling about how their timepiece is powered by their own movement. Regardless of what I or what anyone else says about these things, there's still a strong argument that this is the gateway watch. It's the first watch you buy a young person to get them hooked on watches in general, and mechanical watches in particular, and the display caseback is a major part of that. Alright, moving on then to what I don't like, or perhaps not what I don't like, but what perhaps other people don't like. It's not a big watch. 37mm in diameter with 18mm lug width is not going to be for everyone. But I would recommend don't dismiss a watch of this size offhand, but rather try and get used to one over the course of a week or two. Most other watches will feel unnecessarily big by comparison after that. But I get it, for a lot of people a sub 38 is just not going to work, and it's a shame that they don't do these watches in a 39 or a 40 as well, so that they would have a bit more meat about them for those who prefer that. And while I'm complaining about specifications, these watches only feature mineral crystal, which is nowhere near as durable as sapphire. I wasn't pushing very hard with my spring bar removal tool. Do you remember Nick's 6-year-old Seiko 5? He did renovate an entire house with it on his wrist, but yeah, this was the result. Plus, they only have 30 meters of water resistance, which is the minimum level. Now, if you look at one of those charts, it will tell you that you should be washing your hands with this, but not much else. The reality is, it could probably cope with the occasional dip in the pool if you're prepared to risk it. But an extra 20 meters would have taken the risk out of that scenario entirely. And $100 may be cheap for a Seiko, but it's not particularly good value these days for a watch with mineral crystal and only 30 meters of water resistance. I've looked at dozens of watches on AliExpress that make the 5 look overpriced and underspec'd. And remember, these 5s start at $100, many of them are much more than that these days. And if you want to go with another big Japanese brand, there are no shortage of options from the likes of Citizen and Orient available from online retailers or eBay that still offer more for less. And it may have an automatic movement in the back, but that 7S26 is one of the most basic autos currently available on the market. Even Miyota have upgraded the 8215 to include hacking. This one neither hacks nor hand winds. Plus, you are doing the Seiko shuffle to get it going if it stops, and you'll never be able to set it to the second. Which, let's be honest, is probably just as well given the loose Seiko factory tolerances for these watches. If you want accuracy, don't buy one of these, buy an Eco Drive Quartz instead. But my biggest single complaint about all of these Seiko 5s, even if you're on board with the size, with the basic movement, with the poor water resistance, is the bracelet. The bracelets are shit. Look, I could dress it up, but what's the point? They're awful. Cheap, nasty hair nippers. I've had 2 Seiko SNKL23s in the past, but sold both of them because I just couldn't handle the way they wore on the original bracelets. Sure, you can swap them out to a strap, but that involves extra cost, and personally, I really like wearing a watch on a bracelet. Of course, these watches are built to a budget, and I cannot forget that there are more expensive Seikos with better bracelets, but the ones on these 5s are so bad they're almost pointless. Unless, of course, you don't have any arm hair, in which case, you can just ignore this point entirely. So let's recap then, starting with the pros. The biggest plus, I think, is the fact that it is a Seiko, and it's a Seiko for $100. You're bound to find one you like the look of because there are just so many of them. It's a practical everyday watch with decent lume and a day-day automatic, which you can see through a display case back, which I think is really nice. However, it's going to be a fairly small watch for most people. The specifications aren't awesome. Mineral crystal will scratch, and you won't be going saturation diving with your Seiko 5. The movement is very basic, all of which highlights that you can get more for your money elsewhere, especially regarding the bracelet, which is just awful if you have hairy arms. But what if you don't like shopping on AliExpress and you prefer a big brand on your wrist? What if you don't have hairy arms? What if those arms are slightly smaller than average, so you prefer a slightly smaller watch? What if you're going to wear it every day so the basic movement isn't going to bother you too much? And what if you have no intention of taking it swimming or treating it roughly? Unlike Nick, you take your watch off when you're tiling your bathroom. Well, in that case, only positives remain about these Seiko 5s. So then, do Seiko 5s therefore still have a place in 2023? Are they still relevant? Absolutely they do, and absolutely they are. They're still a great watch for the smooth-wristed amongst us, and still a fantastic way to get younger people into the hobby. Just make sure you know exactly what you're getting, and make sure the cons don't outweigh the pros for you personally. So there you have it. Perhaps not the default choice that they were 5 or 10 years ago, but the humble Seiko 5 still definitely has its place in the market. If you're a one-watch guy or girl with very little arm hair, these things are still pretty awesome. And I guess that's exactly who they were designed for in the first place. If you want more Seiko 5 content, click here or here. Thanks for watching this one all the way to the end. I'll see you again in a future video, I hope.